Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Agreeable Gray Area podcast. As always, I'm your host, Elle, or Leandra, whatever you want to call me. Well, not whatever you want to call me. You can only pick from one of the two. I want to mention something that I failed to in episode 11 about motivation. As you know, that I have a new audio interface. But I forgot to mention what it was called. The audio interface that I have is the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. It totally escaped me to mention it. I was looking at it the entire time I was talking about my new equipment, and I just assumed that you guys knew what I was looking at. And, that's partly y'all's fault for not being in my eyes. You should be in my eyes next time so you know what I'm looking at all times. You guys fail as an audience. That's your fault. I blame you. No. um, I'm not sure what the 2i2 means. I know it's like it could do like two XLR inputs, which I, mentioned last time how I'm planning on having guests on this season. But I saw some other Focusrite Scarletts, and there was like a 4i4, but it still looked like it only had the two XLR ports. So I'm like, I don't know what that means. But, I'm not an audio interface inventor or, manufacturer. So they clearly know what they're doing. And I hope y'all know what that means too, because if you're thinking about getting a different kind of audio interface, definitely do your research or just have an awesome person in your podcasting corner. Like I have Gil, who I've mentioned, several times on this podcast. And he told me to buy this. And I was like, okay. So I wish there was a deeper, more thought out thing, but there wasn't. I knew that my audio could be improved. I know that audio is a very important thing, especially on a podcast, since that's kind of all it entails. So I wanted to improve my audio. And lo and behold, it has improved the audio. So thanks, Gil, for knowing more than me. So, it stops me from doing hours upon hours of research. Because I'm sure I probably would have come to the same conclusion of getting a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. So thanks. Thanks for being more experienced. So on today's episode, I wanted to talk about attention and attraction and like noticeability and how that's kind of, shaped me throughout my life. I wanted to talk about this after the motivation episode because throughout that episode, I pretty much would talk about how, I worked out to just be hot. So I wanted to talk about how like what I've noticed in my life, how that's changed. Because, like we're vaccinated now, we're outside now, we're seeing each other face to face. We're also interacting with people that we wouldn't really interact with before because we're going out and doing things. So, as you all know, COVID 2020 shut down everything. We all went into lockdown. I was about like 185 pounds at that time. My mom was still living with me. I was very depressed. And the lockdown wasn't really helping that because, granted, I wasn't really like going out and doing things much. It was just the whole fact that I couldn't do that anymore that really put a damper on things. Like, it's one thing to not do something because you just don't want to, and there's a whole other thing to not do something because you can't or you're not allowed to. That really gets to you. So, as you all know, one of the few things you could do is go outside and go for a walk, socially distanced. So I would do that kind of often just to save whatever ounce of sanity that I still had left. While y'all were stuck, at the beginning of 2020, I was stuck a year prior because my mom moved in. So back in February 2019. So I was already feeling stuck in my brain, if that makes sense. I just felt like I had to go back to being that daughter who did not give any trouble to her mother. And the best way to be that daughter is to stay out of the way, not talk much, try to give as little trouble as possible, try to be as small and as unnoticeable as possible. If you go back to living with your parents, or your parents move into your space, or even if it's just the holidays, you tend to revert back to who you were when you were a teenager. No matter how old you are, no matter how many kids you may have, no matter how many doctorates you may have, no matter how many houses you may own, it doesn't matter. You are a teenager. And as I've mentioned before, that was a time where I was just very depressed, and it was just a massive shock to the system because when my mom moved in, it was very sudden. It wasn't like 2-3 weeks or months planning. It was just, she called me while I was at work and she said, "I'm moving in today. I'm leaving your father and moving in today." And it just, threw me for a whirlwind. At the time when my mom moved in, I was pretty heavy. I wasn't unhappy though. I wasn't happy either. I was definitely getting into a funk. Probably like 2 months, 3 months prior, I had told like this guy who I had feelings for years, I had feelings for him, and of course he turned me down. Sort of expected that, but it still hurt. Something happened with my brothers that was, very crazy. It was absolutely insanity, like what happened with them. And then, like a month or so later, my mom moves in. So I didn't really have time to process all that. I was definitely on the verge of going into a massive downswing. And then my mom moves in, and my mom's not the most positive person. When she moved in at the beginning of 2019, I had gotten myself a new job that, had better benefits and would provide more longevity because I couldn't have just continued working at the contracted job. I had to get a quote unquote real job. And the job is at a very popular company down here in South Florida. So I am pretty excited and also nervous, starting this job, being the new person. And I just remember there were some mornings where I would be feeling good, getting ready, feeling good about myself, about how I looked. And then my mom would look at me and say that I had like a muffin top and I was looking really fat in the outfit and my hair was looking a mess. And it just like would put a massive damper on me. And then I would have to just go to work at this really great company where everybody's looking fantastic. And I would feel so self-conscious at work that I felt like I was reverting back to when I was a teenager, when I had like the lowest of low self-esteem. I felt like I was dressing terribly. I felt like I looked like shit. And I didn't know where these thoughts were really coming from. I didn't know where like these thoughts and these feelings of inadequacy was really coming from. And it was finally when I put 2 and 2 together and I realized that my mom would just, fill my brain with these negative thoughts. And then I would just have to go to work and sit. And like my desk was like in the middle of the hallway and it was a busy hallway too. And so it was just very nerve-wracking. It was very anxiety inducing. And I had to just do that every day. There were, of course, some days were better than others. It was just like, it was just the whole thought of these feelings in my head that no one can see that. Like no one could see that I really just needed reassurance that I looked okay, that I was normal, that I was fine. Because, my mom would constantly say things about my looks. But there's no way of like speaking to her about this because she was going through a separation, trying to get a divorce. So I couldn't really complain or consult with her about, how I was feeling, how I was doing. So I was just keeping everything in. And with that, definitely launched me into a very big depression that I did not know I was really in. When I say launch, it wasn't like I was catapulted into it. It was it was like a slow slope that you sort of get used to at every single decline. It's like it's like in Naruto when Naruto left the village for like 2 years and he comes back and he sees Kiba's dog is massive. Like before, Kiba's dog could just fit on his head, and now like he rides the dog, I think. When Naruto mentioned that to Kiba didn't even like notice. He's like, "Oh yeah, I guess he did get pretty big. I didn't even notice because he's with the dog every day." So that sloping was kind of, something I was going through every single day. So I didn't really notice just how bad I was feeling, and I just kept holding on to the fact that this was temporary. But it lasted for 2.5 years, which is a very long time. So to go back, it's COVID 2020. There's nothing really to do except, go for walks. My mom is living with me. She's also staying at home for a bit. So she's, at home cooking. So I'm eating like home cooked meals. And I started to like lose a little bit of weight because I'm not, going out to lunch and eating 2 full like sushi rolls for this lunch special at this place near my job, which is still the lunch special and it's still awesome. I'm also like not eating as much because I'm pretty much just eating whenever my mom eats. Like there would just be days when she'd be stressed out and busy, and I was just sort of staying off to the side and not really trying to like do anything that's going to upset her and also do anything that's going to upset me, because when she would talk to me, it would most likely just kind of get me upset because she rarely had anything positive to say to me. I know I'm making her out to seem like she was like a negative Nancy, but she kind of was. Like, I wish I could convey it nicer, but so that's kind of pretty much what I lived with for, the 2.5 years. Was it negative 100% of the time? No. Was it negative more than 50% of the time? I would argue yes. I honestly do not care if she hears this. I would argue it was mostly negative, at least on my end. So in 2021, I'm realizing that I'm going to be turning 30, and that's scary. For anyone who's ever turned 30, you realize that when you're 29, all you can think about is you're about to turn 30. So I was about to turn 30, and I was not looking how I wanted to look. By then, I had lost about 10 to 15 pounds, and I was sort of feeling myself because I've been like kind of walking a little bit more and stuff, but I still wasn't where I wanted to be. So I hired a personal trainer, as I've spoken about, Marcus, and that's when I really started to like lose weight and kind of cut up and things like that. But that was pretty much my whole life. I was still working from home. All I would pretty much do is see my trainer and see my therapist. Those were like the only reasons I would pretty much leave my house. And, of course, to go like grocery shopping. But, for most of 2021, my mom was still living with me. So she was primarily doing the grocery shopping, which of course I definitely appreciated. So if she's hearing this, thanks, Mom. Sorry I said all those negative things about you. If you found them to be negative, they were true to me. She doesn't like my sarcasm. Yeah, so I lost, a good amount of weight. By the time I was 30, I still wasn't quite where I wanted to be. I was pretty much just losing the weight and trying to get fit for my photo shoot. And my photo shoot didn't happen until June of last year, of 2022. So I was pretty much just focused on my routine of just doing the same things. Even after my mom moved out, I was still just, working from home, eating better, going to the gym with my trainer, trying to work out when I could. I would occasionally go out and see friends. So like a few of my friends from work saw me and they were like, "Oh my God, you look great." I was like, "Oh yeah, thanks." But like, I still felt kind of the same inside prior to COVID. I still felt pretty, like I was feeling better, don't get me wrong. I was definitely like not as depressed as I was, at the beginning. But essentially, I still wasn't like where I am now. So one day, my therapist had me do an experiment. And I love doing experiments because it's fun. Like, I love doing things and seeing the results. So he told me to, when I go to the grocery store, to keep my head up and look to see who's looking at me. And I was like, okay. I thought like no one would be like, I was like, okay, this is going to be easy. Like no one's going to like look at me. Because when I go to the grocery store, I'm pretty much very like, I don't really like look around. It's just like, I'm coming in, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that, and I'm going to leave because I don't like being out. So he told me to like, keep my head up and see who's looking at me. I was like, all right, whatever. I highly doubt anyone is. I mean, to my surprise, people were. Like people would just, look at me, glance at me. A lot of the workers did, but I figured like they were just doing that because that's kind of their job to see if anybody needs help. But, seeing the other patrons, the other customers, just, kind of glancing at me, looking at me. Some people would even like ask me questions like, oh, is this yogurt good? Because they would see me just go and grab a yogurt and then just keep it going. But one man actually asked me if a particular yogurt is good. And it was just kind of interesting that, people noticed me because I just assumed that I was just kind of like unnoticeable. So I went to a predominantly white elementary school. Middle school and high school, I was like in honors, advanced, AP classes. And those classes tend to be predominantly white. So I felt as though like I wasn't really noticed. Like because nobody, like no guy was really like interested in me, like I had crushes on, some of the white guys at my school in my classes, but I highly doubt they had crushes on me. It'd be totally dope if they would, like that would be the plot twist of a lifetime. But so I just kind of kept to myself. I didn't think anyone was really noticing me. It wasn't until college I realized that I was, pretty attractive. And this is going to sound braggadocious, but whatever. It was essentially because none of the guys I like would hook up with or mess around with were out of shape. A lot of them had six packs. A lot of them were athletic at least. But I just kind of sort of saw that as the norm. I didn't see that as special. I didn't see that as like me being like attractive or anything. It was like I always knew that I was like above attractive, like above average attractiveness. But I didn't really. It's a difference between knowing and believing something. And I'll actually have an episode about knowing versus believing later. But it's one thing to know something, but it's another thing to like actually believe it and instill it within you. So it didn't really matter. And I guess it's because I wasn't seeing the privilege of being attractive that I thought came with being attractive. Like no guy really wanted to be my boyfriend. There was like this one guy who did. And honestly, I probably would have considered it if his home wasn't a massive fucking mess. Like his home was just like absolutely disgusting. And like he lived with like some other guys, but I was like, I don't know how y'all live in this and y'all are just cool. Like this is absolutely disgusting. Like it's not even like sanitary. Anyway. Yeah. So like I guess I didn't have like any what I thought were like the privileges, like I knew I couldn't date somebody like that. I sort of just, kind of believed like, I guess I'm just going to be like a loner. I had friends. I still have, amazing, great friends. But I guess I just never really felt like I fit in. I just always felt like I was just kind of doing my own thing because I just always felt like alone. I always felt like a loner. Like even now, like I still see aspects of that. I'm creating a podcast and I don't really know why. I just kind of do my own thing. So, of course, y'all, thanks for listening. Since my therapist had me do that experiment, I found it pretty easy to not just be in my own head. Like, it was definitely nice to throw a wrench into my previous belief that no one was noticing me. It was in a way like refreshing. Like, I was just telling this lie to myself that I had no proof on, simply based on nothing. Like, I can't even really think that. Just my belief that I was a loner, that I was just unattractive, that I was kind of like an ugly duckling, when in reality, like, I wasn't. It was just a story that I told in my own head. So what I've noticed now that I'm more fit, more confident, I know more, thanks to my therapist pretty much just throwing a wrench into a belief that I had that I didn't know was causing me so much uncertainty in terms of like where I fit in. I started to notice that people notice me a lot, to the point that it's uncomfortable sometimes. I would be at the gas station and a guy across the street riding his bike will like wave at me. And I'm like, how did you, what? You don't even know what I look like, you know? Like, just from what he can see from far away, it was just enough for him to want to wave and get my attention. And like, yeah, okay, like it's nice, but it's also just kind of like a little discomforting. It's a little uncomfortable because, one, he probably wouldn't have if I was 30 pounds heavier. Maybe he would have. And also, like, I probably wouldn't have noticed him because I would have been so focused on just getting gas that I wouldn't have really thought to look around. Like, the moment I'm thinking of, this was like during the daytime, so I wasn't really like on high alert in case somebody was trying to like kidnap me or pull one over on me, sort of thing. I also noticed that, even at the gym, I get like, a lot of heads turning. And it's like, it's very flattering, but it's also kind of like, okay, of course, like everybody is kind of just looking at everybody at the gym, so I can't really like be mad. But it could be kind of like a little unnerving because like the lie that I would tell myself, my whole life, that nobody really notices me. Now that I'm like aware that that's a lie that I was telling myself, seeing the truth is hard to accept. I don't know how this is coming off. I hope I'm not coming off as like braggy or anything. It's just weird. It's just very weird. I do want to mention when I was like right after college, so like 21, 22, I had lost a good amount of weight. I don't know how much I was before, but then I would do sprints every day. I'd go for walks, and I'd lost a lot of weight. Also, I was like eating less. And I realized that people, people would just like talk to me and just be kind of friendly. And I remember the guy at the liquor store, he was like, I think he said like, do I work out? And I'm like, yeah, kind of. And he was like, oh, because you have like the flattest stomach that I've ever seen. And I was like, oh, wow, thank you. And then I ended up gaining the weight back. And, with everything happening and then losing the weight again, it's like a lot different this time because I guess I have like the tools and the equipment in my mind to know like why this is the case, of why people are noticing me, and that I am actually like a member of society. This sounds so weird. Since I've lost the weight, it's been kind of funny, like the interactions that I've had with my mom, because now all she talks about is how skinny I am. Granted, she's gotten better, but like around the beginning, I won't even say the beginning. It was, a couple of months after she had moved out, and then so of course she wasn't seeing me every day, like the whole Kiba story. So so now that she saw me, and I guess I'm still keeping up with it, like she would look at me like I was like a spectacle, and it was very off-putting. So we would normally see each other at events, like family events. So, she would always, so just to try to talk to me, try to converse with me, it'd just be about how I've lost weight, how I'm looking so slim. And she's like, boy, I never seen you look so slim yet. And I was like, okay, Mom, like, thanks. But like, this is just getting annoying. And I remember I said something that like one of my family members kind of thought was genius. And like she repeated it too, not necessarily to my mom, but like I could just tell it was one of those things where she would definitely be saying that to other people. Like my mom just kept talking about how slim I look, how like this and that. Like it was very weird. It was just very repetitive. And I was like, Mom, stop talking about my weight. There are other things to talk about. And the family member agreed. She was like, yeah, there is other things to talk about. And it made me realize that this was just something that my mom would constantly talk about. It was a bit of an eye-opening moment for me, because when I was thinking back on when she was living with me, how often she would talk about my looks. And it really aggravated me, because I have all of these passions, these thoughts, these hobbies, these endeavors, these interests. And she never wanted to know about them. Like, she had no interest. And it's just that now that I've lost weight, that I guess look appealing in her eyes, appealing enough to smile and talk to me rather than critique and criticize and complain to me, it just kind of made me sad. Like, there was just nothing. I don't know if it was my weight that made her not really want to get to know me, but it really drove home just how much looks weigh on my mom. Like, and everything started to click, everything started to make sense. She's very addicted to Instagram. I feel like that's the understatement of the year. I don't know how to really convey just how addicted she is to this app. And the app is like what my therapist likes to call the second happiest place on earth, because it's just everybody smiling, looking amazing, everybody showing the best of their lives, and it's all fake. It's all false. It's all to just show like pretentiousness and to show a life that you're not even living. I mean, y'all are familiar with Instagrams. Like, if I'm spoiling anything about Instagram to y'all, then I wish I lived y'all's life. But that's Instagram. So like every time I would post something on Instagram, like less than an hour later, she would like say something, and she'd be like, "Oh, delete it. It looks bad. Oh, you should." And then she would like send me a picture of like something that she took of me. It's like, "Oh, you should post this and say blah blah blah." I was like, "No. You use Instagram how you want to use it. Stop trying to push this type of vanity onto me." Like, there were times when she would be like, "Oh, you should put on makeup and take a selfie." It's like, "Why are you looking so sad? You should get dressed, put on makeup, and then take a selfie." Like, that was her cure to everything. It's like, okay, I'm sad, but let me pretend that I'm happy for other people. It's weird, man. It's very weird. So a couple of months ago, I went to see my doctor, and the doctor that I usually see like no longer works at the place. So I ended up seeing like this other doctor. I was like, okay, whatever. And like, she was really cool. Like, she was just like, asking questions, I guess to kind of like distract me, or, just make the time go by, or maybe she, just being friendly. And like, she asked me, she's like, "Hey, do you have a husband?" And I was like, "Nope." She thought it was funny. She was like, "Oh, do you have like a boyfriend or anything?" I was like, "Nope, no, I'm single." And like, I don't know how the topic came. I think like she asked like if I work out, if I exercise. I'm like, "Yeah, I do. Like, I do these things, blah, blah, blah." And she was like, "Oh, wow." I was like, "Yeah, I see a trainer." And then she was like, "Oh, well, that must be like, good motivation for you, because like, your trainer is, probably attractive." She said something like that. And I remember saying like, "Yeah, my trainer is very attractive," because he is. I'm not trying to get with him, but I am also not blind. So like, and it's like, I'm not going to lie, it is nice to be in the proximity of somebody who's very attractive. Like, I feel kind of good if people think that this guy is my boyfriend. I am not going to deny that. Like, I thought it was kind of like, I was like, why is she saying this though? Why is she saying like that must be motivation for me, and things like that? And then she was like, "Oh man, the next time I see you, you're gonna look so good." And I was like, what is she talking about? Why is she saying all these things to me? And then she goes like, "Oh, not like you don't already. It's just that, with how you're working out, you're going to be like, you're going to be so buff. You're going to be so fit." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." Like, it was like a fun, normal interaction, but it was also kind of like, why do you want to know so much? It's like, why do you want to know who I'm sleeping with so badly? It's then that I realized it's because I'm attractive. It's because I'm a good looking chick. I'm pretty. And I forgot that like people do treat you differently when you're pretty, when you're attractive. It is a thing. It's definitely like, there is definitely a pretty privilege. And because we were on lockdown for so long, because I was barely going anywhere for the past 2 years, that I feel like I just kind of walked out of the hyperbolic time chamber where I was, exercising and eating right for like 2 years, but everybody else stayed the same because nobody else was in the hyperbolic time chamber with me. So I step out, I'm still the same person because I haven't really interacted with the outside world. So like when people see me, they're like, "Oh my God, you lost so much weight. How did you do it? Oh my goodness, here's a seat, come sit down. Hey, I want to get to know you. Hey, I want to talk to you." Like, it's just been so long since guys have actually just come up to me and started talking to me. And it wasn't like necessarily because of COVID. It was even, like 2018, 2019. I don't know, dating had just gotten like super stagnant for me. And I don't know. I don't know if this was because of the quality of men. I don't know if it was just because of my depression that I didn't really know that I was in, because I don't really know how long I was in. I don't know how long I was depressed. It's more so that I just know how to deal with depression, and I know how to deal with the stories that my brain tells me, because my brain is an asshole and a filthy liar. So I need to rewrite the stories in my brain. For example, the believing that no one notices me, that I'm just like this quiet chick who's like off in the corner, when in reality, I'm more of an extrovert. And, like, like the lie that I was pretty much telling myself to just try to be like the quote unquote bigger person by not really trying to get into any trouble or anything. And it's like, none of that was really me. It was just a story that I gave myself, the story that I told myself, because it's what gave me solace. It's what gave me understanding. And it was completely incorrect. I do believe that we get what we give out into the world. And I wasn't really giving anything out into the world. I was holding a lot of it in. And therefore, my world wasn't really changing around me. Now that I'm giving more out into the world, now that I'm, doing more things, being more authentically myself, I'm a lot happier. I do feel as though I am getting more in return. I'm, starting to recognize, toxic people who don't uplift me, people who don't provide me, people who don't fill my cup, essentially. I'm recognizing that more. And I'm getting rid of like those people in my life, or just interacting with them less. And in turn, I've seen that I've been attracting better quality people, or just better people in general. So, with that said, I unfortunately have to bring this podcast to an end. Thank you all so much for listening. Y'all have been great. I saw all of you nodding your head along. I am in your eyes, unlike y'all. Y'all aren't in my eyes because y'all failed at that. Y'all should have been in my eyes so you can see me looking at what y'all are looking at through your... I'm kidding. What am I saying? Oh, man. Yeah, don't take improv. You're going to just say some random ass shit. Like the craziest things are just going to come out of your mouth. But yeah, of course, thank you all so much for listening. And I'm going to get an episode out sooner. I meant to record this last week. I apologize. But yeah, no, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for tuning in. And I'll see you on the next one.